Hello, I'm Jamie from Shamrock World, and today I'm going to show you how I continue to grow tamarind trees from seed. This is a continuation of the spring to fall 2019 update video where I documented the growth of the tamarinds from April to late October 2019. In this second update video, we'll watch how my 5 tamarind trees grow while they are in a greenhouse during winter in Texas from late October 2019 to March 2020. On October 17, 2019, we left off where I put my plants in the winter greenhouse. The weather started changing, and we were expecting freezing weather, which wouldn't be good for my plants or the tamarinds. I put my 5 tamarind trees in the back of the greenhouse. Tammy the Tamarind, Tamarindus, Indica, Tam number 1, and Tam number 2. I put the tamarinds in the greenhouse in time before a hard freeze. On November 30th, it had been 1 month since I put the tamarinds in the greenhouse. During that time, the greenhouse had heat lamps installed on the top and ran on a timer. The heat lamp stayed on at night and in the morning. A few weeks ago, I made labels for Tammy, Tamarindus, and Indica, which included their plant dates and transplant dates. Today, it was unusually warm outside. The high for the day was 85 for the end of November. I opened the vents to air out the greenhouse, but the temperature was still above 90 degrees inside on the sunny day. Tammy was looking good, but I discovered that she had a broken branch. I may have broken it while moving around in the crowded greenhouse, but it was a small branch, so I wasn't too worried. The tamarinds were hanging out in the back. They lost a few leaves here and there, but nothing too alarming. I noticed many new buds coming in. Various branches on all the plants were pushing new growth, so the warmth of the greenhouse was enough to maintain the trees. On December 14th, I noticed that some of the tamarinds were bouncing back. A few weeks ago, I noticed the plants were dropping leaves, but now they had new growth and were adjusting in the greenhouse. The tamarinds were a mangled mess, but they were putting on more leaves. Tammy's highest point reached the top of the greenhouse, which was a good and a bad thing. I was glad that she was growing, but I didn't want her to touch the cold cover or grow into the heat lamps. More buds were coming in on Tammy, and I fertilized her a few weeks ago. She definitely looks great. On December 29th, I took 4 of the tamarinds out of the greenhouse to get a better look at them. It had been 2 months since they've been in the greenhouse. It was warm and sunny out, so it was safe for them to go outside for a little bit. The tamarinds were looking good, and they had their nice labels. The 4 tamarinds were in the back corner of the greenhouse. They didn't get much direct sun, but they definitely received ambient heat. Leaves dropped here and there, but it was nothing too startling. Their leaves were mostly closed in the greenhouse. I've never seen them open, which usually happens in the morning. I decided to take them out so I could rotate them. I noticed that some of the branches were pressed up against the cover of the greenhouse. Moving them around every once in a while may prevent the branches from getting bent. Tammy was still the largest plant in the greenhouse at 4.5 years old. She had grown very well over the past 2 months. I thought about potentially pruning Tammy to maintain the wild growth, but occasionally I found myself accidentally breaking off some branches. But as long as Tammy was healthy, I didn't mind the clutter. Tammy looked a million times better now compared to this time last year. Tammy looked terrible and barely had any leaves in the drop cloth greenhouse that I had last fall and winter. Seeing her now was like night and day. On January 19th, it was currently 55 degrees and the high was expected to be at around 57 degrees. The low for tonight would be at around 31 degrees, so it felt more like winter. But thanks to the sunny sky, the greenhouse was over 80 degrees while vented. The tamarinds were still growing in the warm greenhouse. I noticed some fully formed, light green leaves on the plants. The smaller tamarinds were crammed in the back, so their branches were mixed around. Tammy's new leaves have pushed and filled out. I recently started learning about pruning fruit trees, and now I've noticed many branches that I could prune off Tammy. I understood the reason for pruning, which were to encourage new growth, allow the tree to have exposure to sunlight, and to maintain the tree's shape. So I started giving Tammy the pruning eyes. But I wanted to prune Tammy once she got out of the greenhouse so I could have a complete view of Tammy when I pruned. On February 16th, it was 80 degrees in the greenhouse. The high for the day should be in the upper 70s. The weather had been fluctuating from being cold in the morning and warm in the afternoon and evening. We were also expecting a cold front later in the week. Since the plants have been in the greenhouse for 4 months already, the plants might think it's summer or springtime. Some of them might be adjusting or expecting more rain or moisture than what I was giving them since I was watering once a week. Today, I noticed Tammy had a lot of yellow leaves. She didn't have as many last week when I visited, but I figured it had something to do with the inconsistent watering. But I plan to fertilize Tammy and all of my plants. Tammy's soil was a little damp, but I made sure to water her. On March 1st, it was feeling more like spring outside and the weather continued to get warmer. The nightly lows were still a little dangerous, but the days were getting warmer in the lower 80s. We had to vent the greenhouse often because it was too hot on sunny days. It was hard to see which tamarind tree was which, but they were all maintaining very well in the corner of the greenhouse. Tammy was looking good and no longer had any yellow leaves. Tam number 1 and Tam number 2 were comfortable in the back corner of the greenhouse. They definitely loved the warmer temperatures. On March 15th, the weather had been consistently in the 80s, so it was almost scorching in the greenhouse. I had to completely unzip and vent out the door. But because it was warm, I noticed some new growth on Tammy. I decided to kick some plants out, and the first ones up were the tamarinds. I felt that the weather was safe enough for them to go outside. The lows were still in the 50s, but it no longer went into the 40s, and we didn't expect any cold fronts for the month. So the tamarinds could enjoy natural sunlight for the first time in months. Today was a big day on March 22nd. The weather was warm enough to get a good look at all the tamarind trees. It was surprising to see how full they were while they were in the greenhouse. Sometimes they were crammed in the greenhouse, but they've maintained most of their shapes through the months. Tam number 2 grew longer branches and leaves. I loved how this plant has many parallel branches. Tam number 1 was a very simple and top-heavy tree that grew a little taller rather than grow new leaves. Indica lost a few leaves on the tips of the branches, but she was looking healthy. Her set of parallel branches have gotten longer. Tamarindus grew taller over the months and looked great. I might have to train Tamarindus' branches since they were bent and twisted in the greenhouse. And like Tammy, Tamarindus grew new branches. These plants will be happy to be back outside in the Texas spring. Today also happened to be Tammy's birthday, or sprout date to be more specific. I was so happy to have her for 5 years. And now that she was out of the greenhouse and that I could get a good look at her, she looked a million times better than she was this time last year in March 2019. Back then, she barely had any leaves and struggled to survive in a DIY drop-cloth greenhouse that I made last year. This year, she kept most of her leaves from fall. As a birthday gift to Tammy, I finally decided to prune her. Over the past few months, I learned more about pruning fruit trees and what to remove from them. I saw plenty of potential branches that I could cut away. I took a moment to prune Tammy. I targeted inward growing branches, branches that grew or pointed down, internal branches, crossing branches, and misshapen branches. I didn't know the proper shape of a tamarind tree, and I wasn't trying to turn Tammy into a bonsai tree. I wanted to prune to increase sun exposure so she could grow up and be a proper shape to one day produce fruit. It was hard to cut thick branches from Tammy, but I knew that pruning would be beneficial for Tammy at 5 years old. After the pruning session, Tammy looked much thinner and open. I wanted to work on shaping and forming Tammy later on, especially after she pushes new growth. I'll also see if her bare tips will leaf out. I was happy to have all 5 tamarind trees out of the greenhouse. It was a long 5 months, but they've maintained and grew during the fall into the spring. I plan to put the tamarinds in partial sun until they adjust to the sunlight. I also plan to give the tamarinds and all of my plants some Epsom salt and a little bit of fertilizer to give them a boost. I'd want the plants to get some color back in their leaves. I can't wait to see how Tammy will grow after her pruning session. With the warm weather and the fertilizer boost, it will definitely encourage new growth to form on Tammy. It may take a few weeks to see some results, but now I didn't have to worry about the plants and they'll do fine in the Texas spring and summer. The tamarinds have maintained very well while in the greenhouse. Although they were cramped and didn't have much wiggle room among their other exotic fruit roommates, they came out healthy and happy. I protected the trees from the fluctuating Texas winter weather, and they were ready to grow even more in the spring and summer of 2020. I plan to make an update video of the trees while they grow from March to late fall 2020 when the weather starts to change and before the tamarinds go back into the greenhouse. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you want to learn more about how to grow tamarinds from seed, check out my Growing Tamarinds playlist. I may also make a separate video of Tammy's pruning session. And don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel and ring the notification bell for more videos about exotic fruits, growing exotic fruits, gardening, outdoor crafts, and more. Thank you.